Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Harper nervously clicked the place order button on the online shopping site, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been frequenting cross-dressing videos and forums for months now, working up the courage to finally take the plunge himself. With shaking hands, he entered his credit card and rushed through the checkout process before he could change his mind. In 2 days, a discreet package would be arriving at his apartment door containing panties, a silky camisole, shimmery thigh-high socks, and a red dress. He couldn't believe he was actually doing this. Equal parts excited and terrified, Harper tried to push away the worries clouding his mind. What if someone found out? What would his friends and family think? He had always been a shy, sensitive boy growing up, more interested in arts and fashion than sports. While the other boys roughhoused on the playground, Harper quietly sketched dresses in his notebook, dreaming of satin and lace against his skin. But he learned early on to bury those desires deep down. Boys weren't supposed to want to wear dresses, so he hid that part of himself away. Now, at 24, living on his own for the first time, Harper finally felt safe enough to explore this secret side. Late at night, he lost himself for hours watching hypnotizing transformations, men becoming glamorous women with the swipe of lipstick and a zip of a dress. He studied their techniques, marveling at their confidence. He longed to experience that same thrill of stepping into a different skin. 2 days later, the nondescript box arrived as promised. Harper's hands trembled as he tore into the package in the privacy of his bedroom. He spread the delicate garments out on his navy bedspread, hardly believing they were real. Taking a deep breath, he began to shuck off his masculine armor piece by piece. The baggy jeans, the heavy work boots, the plaid button-down that hid his slender frame. Grabbing the razor he had bought for this purpose, Harper started meticulously shaving away every trace of hair below his neck. As he worked, he felt his body becoming smoother, softer, more feminine with each stroke. Legs, chest, arms, underarms. He didn't stop until his pale skin was smooth. Next, he carefully stepped into the panties. The delicate fabric felt amazing against his newly sensitive skin. He followed with the camisole, loving how it skimmed over his chest. The stockings were a bit tricky, but he managed to roll them up his calves without snagging them. Finally, the red dress. Harper reverently unzipped it and stepped inside, pulling it up to shimmy over his hips and torso. As he reached behind to zip it closed, he caught sight of himself in the mirror and gasped softly. The figure gazing back looked nothing like the awkward, gangly boy he was used to seeing. This stranger had endless legs, a gently curving waist, and delicate shoulders peeking out from the off-the-shoulder neckline. The rich red hue made his ivory skin glow. Harper did an experimental twirl, mesmerized by the flare of satiny skirt. Emboldened now, he rifled through the small makeup kit he had discreetly added to his cart. He didn't have much to work with, but he copied the tutorials as best he could. Foundation to even out his skin. Shimmery eyeshadow to make his green eyes pop. Mascara to darken and lengthen his fair lashes, a swipe of rosy blush on the apples of his cheeks, and finally, a slash of bold red lipstick to match his dress. He carefully painted the color onto his full lips, trying to stay inside the lines. When he was done, he pressed his lips together and studied the final effect. The face in the mirror was a revelation. Glowing skin, vivid scarlet lips, smoky bedroom eyes framed by thick lashes. He looked like a 1940s starlet ready for her close-up. He looked beautiful, feminine, powerful. Harper felt intoxicated, punch-drunk on his own transformation. A laugh bubbled up in his chest, spilling out in a joyful, liberated rush. He spun around the room, marveling at the way the skirt danced around his legs, how the fabric kissed his skin. He felt weightless, uninhibited, free. For the first time, the different facets of himself clicked into place. the softness, the yearning for beauty, the need to express his hidden inner world. He didn't have to be limited by the narrow confines of masculinity. He contained multitudes. And in this moment, twirling in the mirror, Harper fell in love with the whole of himself, masculine and feminine, strong and soft, dark and light. He didn't know where this new path would lead him, if he would ever have the courage to show this side of himself to anyone else. But here, in the sanctuary of his bedroom, he could revel in his own private joy, in the incredible knowledge that this had been inside him all along. He was still the same person, but now with access to a new palette of colors to paint his life. Harper smiled at his reflection, at this beautiful stranger who was somehow still him, and made a silent vow. He would never again deny or hide any part of his gloriously complex truth. From this day forward, he would find a way to honor all the versions of himself, wherever that may lead. Because this much he knew for sure, he had never felt more alive, more authentic, more perfectly, completely himself than he did in this moment, embraced in silk and lace and his own tender self-acceptance. Whatever happened next, he would always have this incandescent memory to light his way forward. Harper took one last long look in the mirror, committing every detail to memory, then carefully removed the enchanted garments, tucking them away like precious artifacts. He knew with unshakable certainty that this was only the beginning, the first intoxicating taste of a freer, more abundant life. And he couldn't wait to see what other surprises this uncharted road held in store. He climbed into bed and turned out the light. But sleep was elusive as his mind replayed the night's events on a delirious loop. His body still tingled everywhere the feminine finery had caressed his skin. His world had shifted on its axis in the space of a few hours, but somehow he had never felt more at home in himself. With a contented sigh, Harper finally drifted off, his dreams full of satin and possibility. Over the next few weeks, Harper's nighttime adventures became a treasured ritual. Every few days, after triple-checking that his curtains were tightly drawn, he would reverently unbox his small but growing collection of feminine treasures. Each time, he challenged himself to try something new, whether it was a more elaborate makeup look or a different style of dress. He scoured thrift stores and online sales for affordable additions to his secret wardrobe, delighting in the feel of velvet, chiffon, and silk against his skin. Slowly, he became more adept at wielding eyeliner and contouring brushes, at walking in heels without wobbling. He even started patting his hips and chest, marveling at the undeniably womanly silhouette they created. In those stolen hours, twirling in front of his mirror, Harper felt a deep sense of rightness, of pieces long out of alignment finally clicking into place. But as the weeks went by, he started to feel a restless itch, a longing for something more. As thrilling as his solitary transformations were, part of him yearned to be seen, truly seen, in all his feminine glory. He imagined the awestruck looks on strangers' faces as he confidently strutted down the street, red lips curled in a mysterious smile. In his fantasies, no one questioned his right to exist in that form. They simply appreciated the beautiful woman he became. But the thought of actually stepping out his front door, of exposing his most hidden self to the harsh light of day, filled him with gut-clenching terror. What if someone recognized him? What if they laughed? Or worse, what if they turned violent? The world could be a cruel, unforgiving place for those who dared to color outside the lines. And yet, the longer Harper spent in his carefully curated feminine bubble, the more he felt it turning into a gilded cage. He didn't want this part of himself to be limited to a few square feet of his bedroom. He wanted to experience the world through this new lens, to feel the sun and wind on his delicately made-up face. He knew he couldn't keep this secret bottled up forever. It was too big, too vital, too essential to his being. Sooner or later, he would have to take the leap and trust that the world would catch him. As the weeks turned into months, Harper started to formulate a plan. He would start small, venturing out late at night or early in the morning when the streets were nearly deserted. He'd drive to a different part of town where he was less likely to bump into anyone he knew. He spent hours poring over maps, scouting out potential routes and secluded spots where he could safely emerge into the world as his feminine self. He put together the perfect outfit, a flowy floral dress that concealed his more masculine features, paired with low heels he could easily run in if needed. He even bought a wig in a shade of honey blonde, styled in face-framing waves. Finally, on a balmy night in May 2024, Harper decided it was time. With trembling hands, he went through his now familiar transformation routine, paying extra attention to every detail. He wanted to be as passable as possible to minimize the risk of drawing unwanted attention. As he zipped up the dress and adjusted the wig, Harper hardly recognized the person staring back at him from the mirror. Gone was the shy, awkward boy who faded into the background. In his place stood a striking young woman, her green eyes bright with nervous anticipation. Harper took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the frantic butterflies in his stomach. He reminded himself that he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was simply existing as his authentic self, claiming his right to take up space in the world. No matter what happened tonight, he would always have the safety of his bedroom to return to. With one last fortifying look in the mirror, Harper grabbed his purse and headed for the door. Each step in the unfamiliar heels required concentration, but he found that the rhythm helped focus his racing mind. The closer he got to the threshold, the faster his heart hammered in his chest. At the door, he paused, hand resting on the knob. This was it, the moment everything would change. Once he crossed this line, there would be no going back to the way things were. He would be forever altered, his secret self exposed to the unpredictable whims of the outside world. But beneath the fear fizzing in his veins, there was also an undercurrent of exhilaration, of raw, defiant joy at the thought of finally, fully embodying his truth, no matter the consequences. He thought of all the other secret selves out there, all the hidden multitudes yearning to be seen. If he could find the courage to step into the light, maybe he could inspire others to do the same. With a deep, shuddering breath, Harper squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and opened the door, letting the warm night air kiss his painted lips. And then, before he could lose his nerve, he stepped out into the unknown, his heels clicking on the pavement like a declaration of purpose. The street was mercifully empty at this late hour, the soft glow of the streetlights his only company. Harper walked slowly at first, getting used to the sensation of air flowing around his bare legs, of the unfamiliar weight on his chest. But with each step, he felt a new confidence blooming in his core. Here he was, living his once-buried truth for all the world to see. The night breeze ruffled his skirt and tickled the delicate hairs on his neck, and he couldn't hold back a giddy laugh. He felt like he had shrugged off a lead cape of other people's expectations, emerging as some shining, updated version of himself. Harper wandered the quiet streets aimlessly, simply soaking in the profound joy of being out in the world in his feminine form. He passed darkened shop windows and moonlit parks, marveling at how different everything looked through this new lens of himself. At one point, a car full of rowdy young men passed. Harper tensed, bracing himself for a barrage of slurs. But they simply sped by, fading into the distance, leaving him unscathed and heart-pounding with relief. They had simply seen an attractive woman, not a target for ridicule. As the night wore on and the first hints of dawn started to lighten the sky, Harper reluctantly turned back towards home, knowing he would need some sleep before facing the workday ahead. But even as his muscles ached and his feet throbbed in the pinching heels, he couldn't wipe the irrepressible grin from his face. He had done it. He had taken his most vulnerable, hidden self out into the uncaring world and emerged intact, even exhilarated. It felt like an immense weight had been lifted, a pressure valve released in his soul. As Harper approached his apartment building, buoyed by the success of his late-night foray, A sudden craving for a cold soda overtook him. He hesitated for a moment, realizing that a trip to the corner store would mean more time out in the world in his feminine attire. But the thrill of his recent adventure still thrummed through his veins, making him feel bold and untouchable. He took a detour to the 24-hour convenience store a few blocks away, his heels clicking confidently on the sidewalk. The streets were still quiet at this pre-dawn hour, but the occasional passing car no longer filled him with heart-stopping dread. He felt strangely safe, cocooned in this liminal space between night and day, between his old self and new. The fluorescent lights of the store were harsh after the soft glow of the street lamps, and Harper blinked a few times as he entered, the bell above the door announcing his arrival. The clerk behind the counter, a middle-aged man with a tired but kind face, looked up from his magazine and gave Harper a friendly nod. "Good morning, miss," he said, his voice gravelly with late-night cigarettes. "Can I help you find anything?" For a moment, Harper forgot how to breathe. It was the first time anyone had addressed him with a feminine pronoun, the first acknowledgement of his presented identity. A warm flush spread through his chest, a mixture of pleasure and relief at being seen, really seen, as he intended. He tried to speak, but his throat felt tight with sudden grateful tears. He swallowed hard, willing his voice not to shake. "I'm just grabbing a soda," he managed, marveling at how natural his own words sounded, how right. The man nodded and went back to his reading, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment. Harper made his way to the back of the store, his heart pounding with quiet elation. He stood in front of the humming refrigerators, the cool air a welcome respite on his flushed skin. He reached in and grabbed an ice-cold Coke, but as he did so, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass door. The person looking back at him was undeniably feminine, from the softly curled hair to the dress-hugging, gently curving hips. But more than that, she looked happy, radiant even. Her eyes sparkled with a light that had been dimmed for far too long, her lips curved in a secret smile of self-recognition. Harper felt a sudden rush of affection for this glowing stranger, this hidden part of himself that he was finally allowing to breathe. He had spent so many years at war with his own desires, convinced that this longing made him shameful, unlovable. But now, confronted with his own undeniable beauty, he couldn't understand how he had ever hated this essential piece of his being. Blinking back sudden tears, Harper made his way to the front of the store and placed the bottle on the counter. As the clerk rang him up, Harper smiled shyly, still basking in the glow of being addressed as Miss. It was such a small thing, and yet it felt like a tiny miracle, a validation of his deepest self. He paid and left the store, stepping back out into the hazy pre-dawn light. The streets were starting to stir now, the distant rumble of a garbage truck signaling the city's slow awakening. Harper walked quickly, not wanting to push his luck too far on his first outing. As he climbed the stairs to his apartment, the adrenaline of the night started to fade, replaced by a bone-deep satisfaction. He had done something that had once seemed impossible, shattering the confines of his old life to make space for the self he had always carried inside. It was a tiny first step, but it filled him with a fierce, wild joy. Inside his apartment, Harper carefully removed his feminine armor, hanging each piece with reverent fingers. He felt a pang of sadness as he wiped away his makeup, watching his painted face disappear to reveal the angular planes he was used to. But he knew now that this softer self wasn't a costume he put on, but an intrinsic part of his being that he could access whenever he needed. He climbed into bed just as the first rays of sun were gilding the edges of his curtains, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his spirit soaring. As he drifted towards sleep, Harper felt a profound sense of gratitude for his own resilient heart, for having the courage to honor his truth in spite of the odds. As he surrendered to sleep, Harper made a silent promise to himself and to the bud of authenticity he had nurtured in the secret dark. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would find a way to live in alignment with his deepest self, to show up in the world as the beautiful, complex being he knew himself to be. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.